500.
G'day, this is Expand the Phantom podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com and you can subscribe to our podcast via YouTube or through your favourite podcast app. Please do not forget to give us a rating so others can find us. Today we are going to be chatting with Andreas Eriksson and Jacob Habinc from Team Fantomen, and we will be asking them questions about 2025 from a Fantomen point of view, which includes the big anniversary of the 75th anniversary of the magazine, plus whatever else we can get out of them. I am Jermayn, and how are you, Andreas and Jacob?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah. I've had a very Phantom-oriented morning, work-wise. So I've been just purely emailing about Fantomen today. So I'm ready for this this interview.
Awesome. So I think what we might do is we might start off with some questions about the 75th anniversary, because I think that's a big deal. Besides fruit, and this isn't a contest, but besides fruit, what other, let alone Phantom, but there's not many publishers or publications, magazines that have lasted 75 years. So it's a fairly big deal.
Yeah, I think that when you reach 75, like after that, every 5 years is something that you should celebrate. I'm a big fan of anniversaries myself and using it as like a reason for doing something special in the magazines or something around that. So yeah, from 75 and on, I think that every 5 years is a big achievement. Like you can't find many examples in the world that reach that point.
Yeah, that's it feels extra special for me because I began working with the Phantom right in the middle of the last anniversary when Mikkel Stoll was working with the Phantom as well. I was jumping in as a temp during that time, so I wasn't really involved in the planning of the anniversary. But this time it's my first actual anniversary that me and Andreas are putting on together.
Now, Andreas, I know you're a bit of a nerd, and I know you're not going to be offended by it if I say that. So have you started looking into what other comic publishers have been around that have done 75 years, like non-stop? Have you started looking into that type of stuff yet?
I guess I have it in the back of my head already, not that I have looked at it specifically for this time. But like you said, it's not long ago that Fru had their 75th anniversary. So that's fresh in my mind, what they did. And it means that I have it in the back of my head, what Fru has been doing and what other publishers have been doing with other comics. For example, in Sweden, we have the Donald Duck magazine, which is also the same age as Fru's Phantom. So they have the 75th anniversary already, for example. So a little bit of inspiration in the back of my head, but not that much homework yet.
What can you tell us what's going to be happening for 2025? And I know you're going to keep some cards up your sleeve, but what can you tell us? What will Team Fantomen or Fantomen magazine be doing to celebrate the 75th anniversary?
Yeah, let's see. What can we say? But there's going to be one extended issue, has been tradition for the last couple of anniversaries. So there's going to be one of our double issues. It's going to have a few more pages. I'm not going to say how many more, but it's going to be like a substantial amount more per usual. We haven't really gotten into any like visual changes in the magazine. We're not gonna like do any kind of overhaul of the editorial pages or something. We might do something with the covers, like a logo or something. But we haven't really started working on that because we still have a couple of magazines left for 2024 to finish before that. But yeah, we're gonna definitely work on like having it visible as well. And other than that, we're gonna have some new production as well that kind of like ties into the Swedish Fantomen tradition, what could you say, a continuation of a series of Phantom stories.
Is that the 22nd Phantom Saga?
Might be.
Couldn't get much out of our last guest, Janus Alden, as well. So it doesn't seem like I'm getting much out of you as well. But for those who like to follow the threads, maybe we might see a return of the 22nd Phantom Saga. I like the idea of the logo. I think it was Andreas, you might be able to correct me. Was it the 40th anniversary? There was like a logo that was on the cover for every issue. Is that correct, Andreas?
I think that for most anniversaries, there has usually been some sort of symbol on every issue during that year to show, what we're celebrating that year. So I think we're gonna brainstorm some ideas later on to see what we can do about next year's anniversary.
So that extended issue on the double, is that going to be kind of like your flagship issue for next year for the 75th anniversary?
Yeah, to some extent. It's going to be in the later part of the year. And there's going to be a new story written for that issue. And there's going to be some reprints in there as well that we find suiting for the issue. I think we haven't really it's not set in stone, of course, everything for the next year. But as for now, I think it's going to be all Team Fantomen stories in that issue. And I think that's also something we're going to do in general next year. We're going to focus on old classic Team Fantomen stories that either have never been reprinted or haven't been reprinted in a while as some kind of landmark, or not landmarks, but milestone in the Swedish production, like some look backs at how it's been throughout the years, mixed with our classic amount of new production and some through stuff and some other comics as well, like Thorgal, for example.
Okay, so when we're talking about a reprint of classic milestone stories, are we talking about like real classic stories like that or are we talking about stories that have got a significant story behind it? Could you expand a little bit on that, what you mean by that?
It could be both, I think. I mean, we have a year of issues to fill, and we're going to bring out some reprints along with the new stories. And some stories are selected because they were very popular with the readers, others because they are, as you say, there could be an interesting backstory, and we can fill out some more information now that some time has passed, perhaps.
Okay.
And then the usual, some stories are very fitting for the number of pages we have to fill in that issue. So that's the nature of making a magazine. And also, as Jacob pointed out, this is the anniversary for the magazine, which means that in Sweden, as you know, the other comics, the backups that are not the Phantom, are also an important part of the magazine. In past anniversaries for the magazine, there have sometimes been reprints of also the backup comics. That's not anything we have planned right now. Instead, we have more new stories of very popular backup comics, but we are definitely going to showcase some very good non-Phantom comics as well.
Yeah. I know it might be a little bit early to ask this question now, in the sense that we're at the time of recording, we're in October 2024, and we're talking about 2 to 12 months down the track. But are you looking at doing something special with covers, like wraparound covers, or anything like that? Maybe some variants, or something like maybe a foil or a chrome or a fold-out cover or a sketch cover or anything like that?
As for now, we really haven't planned anything cover-wise. I have actually in my notes, I have a section that says order covers. So I'm going to be ordering covers after this podcast. But it would always be fun to have some kind of like foil, as we did with the Claes Remerti homage number a couple of years ago with a golden foil. I think that would be a fun addition. As with everything, it comes down to a cost, like if it's worth it cost-wise. But it's definitely something we're like telling management to see if it's possible to do something like that. We won't be doing any sketch covers because that's typically nothing we do in Sweden in general. Like there's no culture with sketch covers or alternative covers as in the States. So it feels like that might fall on deaf ears. I don't think like people are gonna recognize it as a tradition from the States, or I don't know if it's the same in Australia if they do stuff like that as well. So if anything, it's gonna be just the usual gang of cover artists, maybe some new, but definitely the older ones as well.
Yeah. So not totally ruling out the special covers, but more of a wait and see.
Yeah.
So look, that all sounds pretty exciting. 2024, you got the Christmas album, which is coming out. You've got the soft cover album that's coming out. You've got the hardcover album, which was the Kate Somerset one, which a lot of people that I've talked to have raved about it. And then you had another special issue that came out as well.
Yeah,
so
the thin one.
Yeah, so that's 4. Are you bringing out a 5th one for 25 or?
No, we're actually going to reduce it back to 3 because the 4th one you mentioned, the thin hardcover, that was a collaboration that we did with a distributor that wanted. So it was like technically a commission job of sort with our own material. Yeah. So it was a test to see if it worked in their market. We haven't really gotten back if it was profitable for them to do this, to add Phantom to their distribution line, because it's even though it's like not called a Christmas album, it was as a Christmas album. It's supposed to be published now. It was published earlier, but it's intended to start selling big now during Christmas time. So it's too early to say if that's profitable for them. If it is, we might do it again, but it's not part of our main tradition of the Christmas album, the soft cover, and now the hardcover omnibus. So that was more a little test. But otherwise, it's going to be regular production as usual. We have the Christmas album coming out next year. We have the soft cover as well.
Is that the second part of the Prince Rex? Exactly.
So that one's going to be focused on the stories about Rex when he's the ruler of Baron Khan. So those two are going to be like 2 pieces that go together. And then we are currently planning the hardcover omnibus as well. Andreas sent me a suggestion for the contents, and we can't really say much about that, obviously, per usual. But that's mainly also because it's not set in stone yet. We still have to work out the machinations of the book and how we are going to make it possible as well. Because we've done the 3 big stories, so to say, that are within 500 pages. I know some people have been asking about the Lubanga series, but we have to remember that the Lubanga story it's a huge project. I think Andreas counted it to 2 or 3 omnibuses would be
Yeah, wow.
necessary.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's 2 or 3 years worth of work you don't have to do.
Yeah, I mean, more or less, you can think of it that way if you're like an optimist. But the problem is also because then you have to work with so many different artists and authors, and everybody needs to have their share of the cake, of course. And it's easier when you're working with smaller teams because then you can do some negotiation and make the budget work. But the more people that are coming in and are contributing with their material, the more deals I have to make, the more discussions I have to take, and so it might be like harder to come up with like or to like make the Lubanga series viable.
So that's a great point. I don't think a lot of fans have probably thought about that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it is every time you print a story like a Team Fantomen story, the writer and the artist, if they're still alive, or even if you got to give them a cut, like a commission for that story to be republished. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it also goes down to the next of kin.
Okay.
Whether it's a widow or a widower or their kids. It doesn't go down to grandkids, but it goes down to kids as well.
Okay. So for instance, this week is Jamie Valve's anniversary of his passing. So if you were to reprint one of his stories, it will go to either his widow or his kids.
Yeah. So and that also makes it like harder when we make these omnibuses when there's like so many people, and there are a lot of instances of kin that we can't contact either because they don't answer, or we can't get a hold of them, or we don't know who they are. And I mean, technically we have the right to publish it because it's in the end commission work made for Egmont and made for Semic. But we always want to try to make right with the people who are entitled to the compensation. It becomes like quite a big task to put together, but that's my work and not Andreas' work. He gets to with the nice themes.
I make a wish list of the stories that I would like to put together, and then it's Jacob's job to make the deals. But I would like to add that in general, this is a much better deal for creators than they usually have. Like, you never hear talk about like Marvel or DC creators ever being asked to negotiate about reprint fees. They just reprint stories as much as they like and pay sometimes a royalty or not. Same with King Features material. Like if you talk to the current team, Mike Manley and Tony DePaul, or if you had spoken to, or Cy Barry for that matter, Egmont is actually giving a much better deal to the creators, and that is despite the fact that Egmont doesn't own the Phantom. It's just a licensed work. But I think that back in the day, like a way of getting top quality talent to work with the Phantom, like for a small publisher or an obscure publisher in Sweden, to attract artists and writers from all over the world. And we're talking about top level professional artists, some that have worked a lot of the American artists that have worked for the Phantom in Sweden. They have also worked for Marvel and DC and other publishers in America. A lot of the artists have also worked for like European publishers, top level publishers. And if you're going to attract that type of talent, you have to offer something. And one of the things that could be offered was good reprint conditions, and also especially because the Phantom stories are reprinted often, so it wasn't just empty words like, "Oh, we're gonna pay you something when we reprint the story." And the fact is that these stories, the Team Fantomen stories, are reprinted a lot in Sweden, in Australia. So it actually does pay out for the creators.
Yeah, and we're also seeing Germany with Zubistan is publishing some Team Fantomen stories as well now. We've got Denmark with Evoke. So there's even more now than what there was 5 years ago as well. So that's a great point.
But regarding the theme, then, if we want to talk about the theme for the next book, we're not going to say too much, of course. It's gonna we're hinting and saying it's gonna be like maybe like 70s, and I think it's 70s and 80s, or just 70s oriented.
I think we keep it at 70s, leaving it open for more later.
It's gonna be older material compared to the Kate Somerset book, so to speak.
Yeah. That's the plan, and like you say, Jacob, regarding what specific story it is, we shouldn't say too much because we have deals to make. But I think that regardless of how that pans out, it's going to be a selection of older Team Fantomen stories.
Okay, so that will be printed in black and white, or are you going to color them?
That's going to be black and white.
Yeah. Now, can I guess, would they be kind of like the origin stories that Ulf Granberg, Jamie Valve, and Kerry Lappinen kind of created? Blank faces, no responses.
Your guess is noted.
All right.
It's always good with these guesses, just because we'll just write down like, okay, new idea.
Yeah, in 2-3 years. It's
No, because I remember, look, as a fan, like one of my first stories that really got not got me hooked, but that I really, really enjoyed was was it called The Avenger? Where it's kind of like the story where the first Phantom, how he trains himself up to be the Phantom, where he goes to the different tribes and he learns all the different skills. He gets is it Abu? It's a real stereotypical racial name there. Abu, I think, an Arab who trains in sword fighting, and then he has the sword, then he has the fight against the person who killed his who was behind killing his father and stuff like that. So I just love that story, love the artwork by Jamie Valve. So when you talk about 70s stories, I'm thinking, oh, that would be nice. So yeah.
It's a good story.
Yeah, it's a great story. So one more specific question about the 75th anniversary, which I will ask, and then we'll just get into some random stuff, which hopefully you might be able to answer as well. Will we see any supplements or extras included in any comics in 2025 to celebrate the 75th anniversary? In the past, we've seen postcards, stickers, rings, badges.
As for now, there aren't any plans about that. That's all I can say.
But what we can mention is that there are new, like if you get a new subscription, there is right this week a new towel, like a big,
beach towel.
Beach towel, and the former, which was also like something that you could get if you order a new subscription, was like the Fantomen logo, but this time it's actually the face of the Phantom, so it's even more attractive, I would say, even to foreign fans.
Yes, that's interesting. So okay, so what about?
But that's not connected to the 75 or anything. That's just like a promotional thing you can get if you subscribe.
Andreas is just throwing me a bone because you're giving me a lot of no comments.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's great. We'll if you're listening to this, there will be an article by the time you listen to this. So that is awesome. Now, is there anything that I haven't asked that you might be able to tell us that we might be able to expect for the 75th anniversary before we move on to some other questions?
Well, all I can say is like there's a lot of fun new production coming out with some beloved authors, I'd say. It's directly connected to it, but it's going to be a fun year in general.
Okay. Are we allowed to know who those artists
We
are?
might go
or
and have to speak more about that as well.
Yeah, well, look, we might as well do that.
Them.
We might as well move on from, because that's literally the first question I have on the other questions. So yeah, please.
First of all, it would be fun to mention that Andreas is writing some stories for next year. There's going to be a focus on two-parters, which was just accidental, I think. There were a couple of two-parters that's in production, with Andreas making two, our old author John Rassy, who hasn't written in a couple of years. He's coming back with a two-parter.
Okay.
And then there's a two-parter by David Bishop coming out as well.
David Bishop.
And, yeah.
Good Kiwi lad.
Exactly. And we've also decided to like partner up the authors with artists. So all these two-parters are going to be made by the same artist as well, the same way we did with the Pidde Andersson story for this year with Alex Saviuk, who made The Killer and the Ghost part 1 and 2.
That one.
Yeah,
I got my copy this week.
Yeah. We introduced the artist Kasia Nia last year, or this year. She made the story Stray Dogs, which I wrote.
That was it, yep.
Yeah. So she's going to be drawing or illustrating two stories. And then we're having Janusz Orden, per usual, drawing some stories. And then we have Percy Ochoa as well, who made... who made the Belle Epoque series for Fru. We worked with him earlier, a couple of years ago. He made one cover for the Street Predators issue, which I think is like Fantomen 24 from 2019 or 20, I think, something like that. And then suddenly he was making a bunch of stuff for Fru, and we're like, oh shit, this looks really good. So we've started working with him, and Pidde is going to be writing some stories as well. He's actually writing two very interesting stories that are not a two-parter, but one of them will introduce or reintroduce a character that's been doing cameos from time to time in Phantom. So I think that story is going to be really fun. I'm not going to say more about that. And then he's writing the story for what you earlier mentioned, like what would be considered the flagship story.
Okay.
Or the flagship issue. I think that's going to be like a treat for particularly the Swedish audience. This year we have gotten a lot of attention for the cover we made for Fantomen. Was it Fantomen 4? The 4th issue this year? 8. The 8th issue of this year, we had the Fantomen with a classic Swedish cathedral in the front, situated in the city of Uppsala. And this one like became very, very talked about in Sweden. A bunch of news articles, and we actually got nominated for best cover on a Swedish magazine for this year. It's going to be announced who won that competition in a couple of days, like in a week. Andreas is going to be at the gala, but hopefully he'll go up on stage and get the and get the little plaque. That would be really funny.
But it's like the Oscars. I have to practice my look happy even though someone else won. I'm like,
exactly. Yeah, but it's quite fun that cover got so much attention, because I remember that Andreas was very adamant about making this cover, and he was pushing me, because there was this comic book festival in Uppsala which he was attending, so he really wanted to make this special, and for some reason I thought, well, this is just a regular cover, but then it really got blown out of proportion in a good way. So we've learned from that, and we're going to be working similarly next year. I think I'm.
So when you say you're looking at doing that, will you try and coincide other comics with conventions or with events? So, like, would you do a Gutenberg book fair cover, or
maybe? I think making a book fair cover is a bit done. Like especially for Egmont, we've done that with a bunch of other issues. So we might
not comics, like not the Phantom.
Yeah, exactly, not the Phantom. Other comics like Donald Duck and other brands that we have. So that's a bit done, but that's definitely something like we're looking at how we can like implement the Phantom, like placing him at the scene of a place where we then ourselves can show up and sell the comic and talk to readers, but it's not been decided where that will be yet.
And look, let's face it, it is gimmicky, but if it sells more comics and gets attention, bring on the gimmicks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's not it's obvious that the Swedes see the Phantom as like an inherently Swedish character. I know that it's the same for Australians, but you know,
it's
like
kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, there are so many stories of the Phantom visiting Sweden during different times, like historical times and stuff. So it's only natural. This is like it is a recurring idea and a theme for Sweden, definitely.
Well, we also saw the Norwegian story, the Lightning Strikes, the Mask of the Phantom story that you released, which was released around the same time was it Free Comic Day in Norway or something, and that got heaps of attention over there. So yeah, it works. To be honest, I wish Free would do that. Every Sydney Supernova, they would stick the Phantom, you know, with a kangaroo, and the Sydney Opera House, and create another short story or whatever of the Phantom visiting Australia, because we're just as patient as what you guys are.
I think that when you do 19 issues in a year like we do with Fantomen, it's okay to do a couple of gimmicks every year, and I hope the readers understand that there is a point. All readers benefit if we can get extra attention and find some new readers, buyers, so to speak. Even though we sometimes do something that they may feel is mostly for the attention. I think we try to make it worth reading as well. But there will always be some people that think that they just did this because
PR stunt or something.
Yeah, like a PR stunt. Yeah, it's exactly what people are going to say about some things, but there is a point to it, of course.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of stories set in Australia, we are actually producing 2 stories. For some reason, we're doing that. So we have 2 stories that Fru can pick up if they want.
Okay, so tell me more in the great words of the movie that we all grew up on. So you're saying that you are producing 2 stories where the Phantom visits Australia?
Yeah, right. I think it's it's Australia, isn't it?
It's a city in Australia that is mentioned. Yes,
I think they go there. Yeah, exactly.
Now,
so it's
can I assume this is probably David Bishop?
No, actually not. That's also the ironic thing. It's John Rassy, so it's a Swede. Yeah,
maybe
world's
it's
turning upside down.
maybe he wants to do a trip to Australia, and he's going to use it as a tax deduction or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, there's a couple of great points that we've got out of this so far. Talking about Australia, in past podcasts, Jacob, you made mention that some of the quality of the Frew stories, you made mention of it that it might not fit a Fantomen story. Now, the reason I'm kind of assuming that is because your readers are different than what a Frew readership is. Do you think the quality of, maybe the quality is not the right word, but do you think the stories have improved where you can see yourself producing or reprinting more Frew stories?
Yeah, I think it's improved quite a bit, and I think that's also apparent when you look at our production or our issues, that we do publish more and more Frew stuff. And I think like my main issue earlier was that in the beginning, like in the earlier stuff, like if you just look a couple of years back, it felt like a lot of the stories coming from Frew were sequels or prequels to older Team Fantomen or older King Features material. Which it's like a personal opinion that I find that sometime a bit redundant or drab. You know, like you don't need to explain the backstory of every character or explain the future of a villain and stuff, because sometimes it feels like you're saturating the character, or like or maybe the opposite words, like you're like overusing it. But I find that there are coming more and more stories from Frew that are unique and have fun takes. And it's definitely a plus that they're also doing like so many parts of it. So if there's a part from Frew that's like 3 or 4 or even 6 parts that are really good, that also gives us more incentive to, like, you know, take the whole package and give it out. And that's just good for us to fill out our issues with unpublished material for Swedes. Because I know that both me and Andreas usually try to think of every year that we want to introduce something new or show a story that's never been published before to our readers, which we have a very broad definition of new. It's like, it's both Frew material, which I know some people read like in English as well, but there's also like when we find these new Bastet stories that have never been published, or we find new stories by old artists that have never been published before, or like reworks that have never been seen before.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in that sense, it's like we're really happy to see the improvements in the quality.
So
definitely,
when you're looking at a story, like, without giving away all your trade secrets, what are a couple of key that you are looking for? Like when you're getting a Frew comic, can I publish this in a Fantomen story? Is it the art? Will it work good in black and white or color? Is it the art style? Does it have to have humor? Like just to kind of, because there's a lot of creators in here that listen to this podcast and they may be interested. Like, what are some things that you're looking for to decide whether it will be a good fit for your Fantomen readers?
Yeah, I think definitely personally, I think humor is very important, because I think that's something that, especially with like less experienced writers, is something that is forgotten, especially when it comes to the Phantom. There are a lot of people who think that the Phantom is like a ghostly hero who never smiles, when he's actually the hero that does smile. That's like one of his traits, that he's a pretty positive person for being, and he's a family, like he's a dad, he's a family man in the end. So I think humor is very important. and also the fact that you have to remember that the Phantom is not a superhero. He's strong, but he's not the strongest man in the world. He has to be cunning and is not won't like how do I describe this? There's a lot of stories that I've seen, or a lot of manuscripts I've seen where once the Phantom actually starts fighting, he always wins, and most of the conclusions and climaxes end with him just punching the villain immediately. But if you look at older King Features material, the Phantom is like tied up every other story because he is just a guy and he gets overwhelmed. So being able to like not write him as a unstoppable machine is very important for me as well. And the third and final point I may be having is with the villain. Like there's a lot of people who are trying to write the new main villain for the Phantom, or try to make some kind of forced connection to another villain. And I mean, you can obviously do that from time to time, and if you have an interesting point of view, you can do that. But there's sometimes where there's a story where it's like, oh, this character could just be a robber or a thief. It doesn't have to be the long lost son of Dogai Singh, or you know, like, and also like it's okay for a villain to either die or be caught in the end. They don't have to escape and hint on another sequel, because it's okay to like make a conclusive story that just ends, that doesn't open up for more.
It's worth making mention that when you're making these decisions, it's for your readers in Sweden. It's not for the through Australian readers. It's for your guys. So what works over here, you know, might not work over there, and what works over for you guys might not work for us. So I think it's worth keeping that in mind as well.
Yeah.
You made mention of Bastille Comics. Now I've seen them in the Wick publication, and I think they've done a great job in reproducing those in black and white. The art looks quite amazing. You can see our reviews on our website as well. Just be interested, what's the reaction been like that from Fantomen readers? Have they been enjoying the stories?
I don't know if we've had that much feedback yet. Perhaps some few people have gotten in touch, but I think the big test will be the vote for best story. However, I don't either expect stories like that, which are quite short, to be very high up in the ranking either. So, well, we'll see. I think that it's worth trying out. And as we spoke about the Fru stories before, like when I look at stories to recommend for Jacob to pick up from other publishers, I look at pretty much the same thing for both Fru and Bastille. First of all, the artwork, which I think that we have conservative fans and Fru has conservative fans, but the taste is a bit different. So we don't necessarily agree on what the Phantom should look like. But I try to recommend stories where I think that the artwork could be appreciated by Phantom fans. And for comparing to the Bastille stories, like Wick has chosen to only reprint the stories by one artist, Tafalla, who was perhaps the best artist they had. There were some Bastille stories which had, in my opinion, terrible artwork, and they cannot be reprinted, not unless it's like a very limited edition for the most diehard fans. But the artwork is too bad to satisfy most fans. And also, both with Fru and Bastille, you have to take a look at not just if it's an entertaining story, but sort of how it works with continuity and stuff like that. There's also, especially in the Bastille stories, sometimes the Phantom walks around in a Phantom costume and says hello to the police officers, and they say, "Hello, Phantom, we have a new case for you," and stuff like that. And that, of course, wouldn't work with Swedish fans that are used to the Phantom being a mysterious and a legendary character that most people shouldn't actually believe that he exists. So that's and that's also something that I notice in some Fru stories, that they tend to write the Phantom as if he is a well-known actual living person rather than a mysterious legend, and that is also something that can be complicated. And then you have the historical stories, which are also, we have a lot of fans that sit with a notepad and take notes on which year something happened and who the Phantom met and where, and if it's possible to travel from America to Asia in the time span between two stories and stuff like that. And you don't have to take it super seriously, but there are some stories, again, especially from Bastei, but perhaps also some from Fru, where it just doesn't work. And you could publish them, but then you would have to do like some editorial piece first explaining that this is their version, it's out of continuity, we don't have to pay any attention to the details, just enjoy the story. Those are some things that I have in the back of my mind when I do story recommendations for Jacob, and I think Jacob looks a bit more on how the story structure and, like he said, how the reading value of it, while I look more at the continuity and how it would appeal to Swedish readers.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's also why we're a bit hesitant to publish the spin-offs that Fru have made, with like the Vietnam Phantom and the Phantom of the Future, the Crusader, and by Gaslight, because we're not sure how we're gonna fit that into our own continuity and how to. It's like maybe if we have to be like super open with like, this is something separate. This is an alternative multiverse-esque version of the Phantom.
I was just going to say, it is worth making mention that the Phantom Crusader was actually a Fantomen creation and not a Fru creation.
Yes.
Yeah, but still, the Fru stories by about the Phantom Crusader. Yeah, they still have to. I don't even know if they got finished. If it's an open ending, that's the problem with that series.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. Learning and being told how you juggle that. So I do appreciate that, Jacob and Andreas. The next question I want to ask is, Rafael Ruiz has created a few short stories in the last year or so, and he's been using a new art style. Personally, I really enjoy that, more of a cartoony, younger adults, or younger children's, teenage type of style. Have you had much feedback about that? Whether people have been enjoying it or not?
I've seen on some Phantom group that somebody was questioning the height of the Phantom, that he was like enormous, but that's a very like pedantic little thing to talk about. But other than that, I feel like it's been fairly positive. I think it's always a bit nervous when you're introducing new styles to the Phantom. But then again, we also have a good tradition of people having their favorite artists just because of their unique styles. It's very easy to see a Kari Leppänen story compared to a Janus Ordon story or a Hans Lindahl story. They are so very different. So I'm hoping that the change in style or the introduction of artists with unique styles, that it's actually an easier pill to swallow than you might expect, just because like that new Rafael Ruiz style, for example, that might be a new reader's favorite artist or like favorite style of art. So I think it's just healthy to have a big mix of art styles, and we do have some artists that definitely have more traditional Phantom styles, which I also think is like very nice to have as well. So I think it's just good to have a big mix, but I wouldn't say that we've had any direct feedback regarding that. It's always interesting to see how that turns out in the vote, even though also the vote is sometimes biased to some kinds of stories, but also like it's hard to make form an opinion from that data as well.
It kind of leads to another question: is how important is it to get the interest and to reach the younger readers? So is a different art style one way of doing that? You've got Cassie Nye is another one who's got a different, not a Cy Barry's type of style. I'm not sure if that's kind of making sense, but the way I see it is to have these different styles. It's for us old folk. I'm sorry, Andreas, but we're now old. We're now old Phantom fans. Kind of have to have that style to reach the next generation. Do you agree with that, or?
I agree, but I think the problem is that the new readers, it's difficult to bring in the new art style in the regular magazine, because that is mainly bought by the regular buyers already. Yeah. So that's a bigger question. How do you get the people that aren't reading the Phantom and that might like these new art styles to even notice them? Unless they're already buying the magazine, they won't notice it. So that's like a bigger issue. And also, I think that the biggest issue isn't about the Phantom at all. It's not up to the Phantom to inspire people younger than us to read and buy magazines or books even. That's like a bigger issue in society, that the Phantom's percentage of how many people in society that are reading is always going to be about the same. So the best way of making new readers would be like to have schools doing something to promote reading and using comics for that. I know that Egmont has some projects together with schools where they use comic books as reading material for kids, but not the Phantom yet anyway. So, but that's where we are at. In order to increase readership among younger readers, we have to first teach them how to read comics.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the bigger issue, that like the printed matter in general is on a decline, and you can see that in all different brands and newspapers, books, graphic novels, comics. Like people don't. I mean, I'm sure they still read online maybe, but like they don't buy printed stuff anymore. It's not like the main source of entertainment now with digital social media and stuff. As Andreas says, that's not the Phantom's work to fight against social media and like screen time. That's like a bigger issue. But if you look at the Phantom per se, and like your question about these new art styles, I think it is important to like try new stuff and see if you can find new readers. I think like I know that a lot of people mentioned the Kosiania cover to me because it stands out so much from other Phantom covers. It looks very youthful, or it looks like something aimed at a younger audience. And as Andreas said, the people who read the Phantom, they all get that issue in their mail regardless and probably read it and enjoy it. But maybe there was like a kid somewhere out there who saw it in the newspaper stand and was like, oh, wow, this looks interesting. I haven't seen this one before. And maybe they bought it, and maybe they fell in love with the Phantom character and started reading and subscribing. So it's a balancing act. Like, how often do we appeal to the younger audience? Do we actually get more subscribers or more readers? And most importantly, also, can we do this without alienating? Today, it's so polarized with, like, culture in general is so polarized. And the last thing we want is to somebody to think, oh, they're abandoning the older readers to later to the new ones. Like, I don't want anybody to go around and, like, you know, thinking like, oh, Phantom has gone woke because Diana's on the cover, even though it's been like that for years before,
Yeah.
It's always like a bit scary to like, you don't really know how people are going to react because the tiniest thing can set off a chain reaction.
Yeah, I mean, you hope that the readers understand that if we do 3 covers in a year by new artists that all have a new style, and the rest of the year it's Henrik Sahlström and Luca Erbetta, that they like understand that we're not trying to change the Phantom altogether. We're trying to do some spotlights to stand out in the newspaper store and attract some. I mean, in some cases, it could be like even that someone has stopped reading the Phantom and then they see the magazine and like, wow, I don't like that. But at least they notice that the magazine is still there, because you also have to. People seem to think that when they stop reading a magazine, it disappears. They don't think that it even exists, and perhaps it doesn't exist in their local shop anymore or something like that. And then they think it's gone in the whole country. So anything that you can do to bring attention to people that the Phantom still exists is a good thing, even if it means that some people will, write an angry email or a comment on the Facebook page and say, this does not look like my Phantom. And then you have to try to talk to them and say, this is a one-time thing. Please check out the rest of the 18, 19 issues this year, or the hardcover collections or the softcover collections with the old classic stories and stuff like that. But it's difficult to be seen both in the magazine shelves in the stores and in the online media, where there is so much marketing for so many things.
I hope that answers your question.
No, it's great. It's great food for thought. It's got me going off in a million and one direction. So we're talking about like the readership of the magazine, and this is why I like having regular conversations, because we can kind of get down nitty and gritty and stuff like that. Do you have stats on like who reads your magazine? And then on the flip side, and that's pun intended, do you have stats on who reads it from the digital format, which is called Flip?
Yeah, wise when it comes to the printed version. Obviously, we do have stats of like retail sales and subscriber sales, and those are like fairly stable. I'm not going to go into the numbers exactly, but there is a decline in general. Like everybody's experiencing decline. Phantom is not unique there, but it's like fairly stable. So like there's no issues there. And when it comes to Flip, it's actually one of the more popular magazines.
Interesting.
Yeah, I find it very interesting as well, and I don't know how come, but I think it's really great to know that the Phantom, like when it's in this like subscription-based like digital format, that it's still like very popular there. And I think they count how many minutes people spend per page. And on that note, the Phantom was also fairly high. So it's like people are engaging with it like for a long period of time. They're not like just flipping through it. They're actually sitting down and reading the stories.
Yeah, that's encouraging to hear as well. Now, I know Andreas gets this question a lot of times, so hopefully he never has to answer it again, because he's going to answer it here. Could you just explain why you cannot supply an English version of your magazine, whether it's a digital one or a printed one?
Yeah, I think it's two issues. Firstly, it's the cost, how much it would cost, like how much of my hours would I have to put in to proofread the English version, who's gonna put in, like who's gonna actually write in all the text, if we're buying material from, like, for example, for Thorgal, whose translation are we going to use, then we have to buy those as well. So it becomes like a big logistic problem, like how are we going to make time for it? And then it's also a issue with just rights. Like we don't have the rights for Fantomen in English. We only have the rights to publish it in Sweden.
In Swedish also.
Yeah, in Swedish. If anything, I mean, Egmont exists in the UK as well. So if anything, like the only way that we could do that is if we got the rights for Fantomen in Great Britain and they have it on a digital site there. But then it's like, then it's probably not us being working on that. Then it would be a British team there.
It will be a separate magazine as well.
Yeah,
exactly.
I say this every time it comes up in like discussions on social media, that you cannot expect a publisher to publish anything in a language other than their country. The distribution is so complicated, which is also why you never hear anyone wondering why isn't a French publisher publishing in Swedish, because it's not logistically possible to make it profitable. You have to have a company in the country itself. Distribution is different in every country. And like you say, the cost for translation and like the work of putting the text in, that's an additional cost. Then it's like you say also, if you don't own the character yourself, if it's a licensed character like the Phantom or Marvel, or, I publish Marvel or Transformers and other stuff with my own publishing company, and they don't want you to publish in any other language than the languages of your country. They want to sell the rights to another publisher who has English, like in the UK, India, Australia, or USA, because they will be able to sell more in that language. They have like distribution set up for the entire country. If people think that if Egmont produce an English edition, that, you would sell lots, but we wouldn't, because it would be very difficult for people to buy it all over the world. Like Fru doesn't make a profit on the few fans that buy the Fru magazine outside of Australia. Fru makes the profit from the fans that buy it in Australia, but not very many of them would buy an English magazine from Sweden. That would be like the same few collectors that, a small number, just like it's a small number of people outside of Australia that buy the Fru magazine. It's not going to be the whole number of Fru readers that buy an English language Swedish magazine, which will have enormous postage costs. And even if it's only digital, then you have to have the digital set up and all that. I always say, if you want to read the Phantom in a specific language, whether it's English or German or Portuguese, you have to talk to a publisher that works in that language already. It's impossible to expect someone to have like the whole distribution and logistics set up for publishing in another country or another language than the main languages of their own country. It's too much work, and then it just doesn't make a profit.
All right, well, hopefully you never have to explain that again on social media. And next time you get asked that, you could just point them to this podcast, Andreas.
Yeah.
Talking about social media, now, Team Fantomen, Egmont, whatever you want to talk about, doesn't really have a very good social media presence. Is that something that you're kind of looking at improving, or do you just leave it up to the various fans to do your work for you?
Well, I think first of all, I want to give great thanks to all the social media groups that are out there. Like, there's so many Phantom related groups that I'm a part of. I'm not posting or commenting, I'm just lurking and like looking and I learn a lot about our audience and like what's interesting and what's selling and like what the vibe is in general. And I think it's really interesting and fun to see that there's such a vibrant community. Like, because back in the day we had the Phantom Club, where the main source of community and entertainment was through the editorial pages in the Phantom. But now, with the emergence of social media and like fan groups, that has kind of like taken the role of the community from us. It's become like more of a grassroots community where people like talk and discuss ideas and post pictures of their art, of their own like fan art or of their collections and stuff. So in that sense, we don't really need a Fantomen Club in the same way, because everybody has the opportunity to discuss with each other, and there won't be like a page limit on how many letters we answer. And also, like, there are people who are Phantom fans that know more than me, definitely, and some even more than Andreas. Like, there are people, like, there is such a vast amount of knowledge about the Phantom that is like surpassing our official knowledge. Like, if you just look at the Phantom wiki, which I daily use just to like look up stuff because it's so extremely organized, there's so much work being done, like, just altruistically, that we can't, like, it would be unnecessary for us to like regurgitate that information, because it's like it's already out there. And then the boring answer is that, as usual, it's like a cost thing. It's like we don't really have the time to have such a integrated discussion with fans like Ulf Granberg, for example, had when he was running Fantomen. And it's like that's something you see with all magazines. There's a very few comic magazines in Sweden where you have that kind of a community through the comic. I think that's my answer. We don't really have like any plans of like expanding, and the Phantom Club then is like still on ice, as we've been saying for a couple of years. There's not enough incentive for us to do that right now, which I know it's a boring answer, but as I try to sugarcoat in the beginning, there's such a big community online right now that hopefully will like fill the void of what we usually, like back in the day, did in the magazine.
We have to focus on actually doing the magazine and the books, with the occasional promotion on the Facebook page, of course, and stuff like that. But again, it's an opportunity for others to do something, like the way Chronicle Chamber has grown. But as you know, it's a lot of work and unpaid work for it. Like, if we would take that number of hours and add to the hours that we're already doing, and like expecting it to be unpaid, then we wouldn't have any time or energy to actually produce the comics. So in that case, we sort of have to rely on the fans to spend a lot of time promoting and discussing. And I mean, I've been part of that for years as well, so I know how that works. But you can perhaps wish for a little bit more visibility in social media and more promotion, but you sort of have to. It has to be with the intention of actually selling something. Otherwise, why should Egmont, spend time on it? Because Egmont has to pay for the hours that we're doing stuff. So yeah, we focus on working on the actual books and magazines.
All right. So while we're talking about money, we've got a couple more questions left. If you could change one thing about the magazine, the Phantom, the way things get done, whether it's restriction or, so there's no, money's not a problem, restrictions from KFS, restrictions from your bosses, none of that's an issue. And if you can change one thing, what would it be?
I would have a second member in our little group, like me and Andreas, that would work continuously with new production in the way that Ulf Granberg was doing back in the day, like just one person doing all the new production, and that we could do it in every single number. I think those were the golden days, and that was like I believe that must have been the most fun time to like every day sitting like working creatively with the artists and writers and like just creating the massive world of the Phantom. Because when you think like just like time wise, it is kind of crazy that I'm that me and Andreas are doing that whilst I'm project leading 8 other magazines that I I besides the Phantom. Like I do so many other, like I work with like Donald Duck pockets, which are like 500 pages per issue, 6 issues that I have to proofread as well.
Wow.
So it's like there's so much time that I spend on my other projects, and if so, it would not be possible even if I had the funds to make 19 different new production stories. So it would be like just have another person and just like either have that person do that, or they take my other responsibilities and I'll just get to work.
And you do the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And it's good that you mentioned this, Jacob, because I agree, of course. Also, I think that the one thing that could motivate that is if Team Fantomen exports more stories to other countries. But I think that no one is willing to take the risk before they see that there already is a market, which is hopefully what we're seeing now, that, as you mentioned, there are publishers in Germany and Denmark and other countries that are expressing interest in the Team Fantomen stories. But they are all smaller publishers. Like back in the day when Team Fantomen exported not only to Australia but to other countries, all those publishers were much bigger. Now the market has shrunk and the Phantom is not a very big famous character, but still there is some interest. But if you can just adjust it a little bit more, I think that you can find 10 other countries with small publishers that could split the cost, and then it could be worthwhile. Because if it's only Sweden and Australia that is publishing a story, it's quite a high cost for just 2 countries to use a story. We'll see what happens in the future, and that was, if Jacob is producing new stories in every issue, I want the magazine to go back to being 26 issues a year, not just numbered from 1 to 26, but actually 26 different publications in the hand. Every 2 weeks you get a new issue in the mail or in the store, and preferably increase the number of pages also.
And supplements.
Like
we want supplements.
Yeah, but you said only one thing. Now it's a lot of things.
You're saying everything we want.
Yeah, but I think that it could be possible, but of course you have to balance things. So if you add more pages, then logically speaking, the content has to be cheaper. And can you find material that is cheaper but still good enough is the question. Because I don't think that fans that wish for more pages or more issues, they don't say, I would gladly pay this much extra per issue. They still think the magazine is expensive. So they want, just like me, and Jacob, they probably want 26 issues a year, more pages and new stories in every issue. But are they prepared to pay for it? And if they're not prepared to pay for it, how do we make the contents cheaper but still worth what they pay now? These are the things that when you're stepped behind the scenes, you get the full picture. When you're just a fan, it's easy to sit and like, I want the magazine to be, why can't they do new stories every issue like they did in the 1970s? Well, in the 1970s, the magazine sold 160,000 copies in Sweden alone. So that is the difference. Times have changed, and you have to balance things. When you're behind the scenes, you have to balance things, and luckily that's Jacob's job to make the budget work.
Good. All right, so we're going to do just some more generic type of questions to finish up off. If you could only have either a TV show, a Phantom TV show, or a Phantom movie, what would it be?
I think I'd go for the movie.
And why is that?
Well, now actually, I'm starting to second guess my. Because I don't know if there's any I have yet to come across the perfect Phantom story. I don't know if Andreas has his idea of perfect Phantom story. So maybe it would be better to have if you made our Phantom series year one, if you made that into like a HBO 10 episode one season, that might be really cool. Actually, I think that might be my answer instead. Then, like, you find one of our like multiple part series and you make that into a series.
Yeah.
But I don't know which one it would be because yeah.
Well, I would definitely want to make it a series, and I would want the scope to be even bigger, like include a lot of past Phantoms stories. Episode 1, the 21st Phantom. Episode 2, he reads a story from the Chronicles of the 6th Phantom about the Jungle Patrol founding. And episode 3, it's back to the 21st. And then, a bigger scope. Because I think I know that a lot of fans enjoy the 21st Phantom as like the Phantom, and everything else is just backstory. But I think that to me, and a lot of people that grew up on reading the Swedish stories, doesn't matter if you live in Australia or in Sweden or in Norway, but if you grew up in the 70s and 80s and beyond and have read those stories, you feel that every Phantom is like a main character. I think you can only really do that in a TV series where you give several Phantoms the spotlight of being the main character, and then you build like a bigger picture of it all, of the family of people that have become the Phantom legend, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been saying this for a long time, so I'm waiting for to get credit one day. But I would do the TV show like that as well. What was it, Arrow, the TV show, how they had him in the current day, and then they had him 5 years ago when he first landed on the island. The Phantoms just got that whole past storyline works quite well. There's that DC series by Joel Orlando, I think it is, Andreas, and I can't remember who the writer is. It might have been he's a US guy. The name escapes me at the moment. But it's two storylines. So one of the 13th Phantom and the 21st Phantom, and he's literally kind of Rex is reading the story about the 13th Phantom, and it mirrors the story in a lot of ways of the 21st Phantom. So there's plenty of ways how you can kind of have the past and the present kind of merging together. You get classic stories like the Golden Rune or the Ibis, where they have what happened in the past actually, kind of works in the future. Mike Bullock did one in Moonstone as well with the annual. So I think, all that type of stuff I think would work better in a TV show, TV series. So that's good. All right, I've got two more questions. Where will the Phantom be in 10 years' time? Will the Phantom survive to 100?
In some sense, yes, I believe. It might be more like, if you look at it from a Darwinistic point of view, adaptation is survival, so maybe the Phantom becomes even more niched and finds its like main source where it survives, or it's a boom. It's hard to say, but I definitely think it will be able to survive.
Again, it's outer circumstances that will make the biggest difference. Things that we maybe can't predict today, like the effect of AI or wars and other disasters. Like they have a much bigger impact than anything we can do, really. First of all, I think that the Fantomen magazine will be around for as long as we have magazines in Sweden. So it depends on, does the entire magazine industry in Sweden last 10 years? In that case, Fantomen will be there. But if something drastically changes, so you can't anymore like distribute magazines in stores, like if that disappears, how can we, the Phantom can't survive if no magazines can survive. Yeah. So it's more like we have to work as if everything is around us is not sabotaging the whole industry. And as long as that doesn't happen, I think that the Phantom will be around as a magazine in Sweden. I think that the Phantom will be around as a comic character, but it's difficult to say how long will there be new stories. That's like a question for King Features, because as you know, there are no more new stories with Mandrake. Mandrake faded away, but they restarted Flash Gordon last year to some degree of success at least. So have they found like a way to say that, yeah, we can make the Phantom work indefinitely for as long as we produce comics at all? Or will there be like breaking point for King Features? Like if there are fewer than this many newspapers, then they don't care. Will they care that the 100th anniversary is just a couple of years away? Again, it's other factors like how will people consume reading in the future? How will we distribute printed magazines? Will people start paying for digital in a way that covers the costs? These are big issues, and we don't have the answers. We just have to adapt.
Yeah.
No, very good. There was another question which I did miss, so I am going to jump in. I know, and so I apologize for stretching the friendship with the amount of time I spend with you. A couple of years ago, we saw in the Sunday stories Jeff Weigel creating different costumes for past Phantoms. Again, in a recent Sunday story, we've seen the Unknown Commander's office change from empty with a safe to now fully furnished. When you see major changes like this in the newspaper stories, what's your decision process on whether you implement that change in your own Team Fantomen stories?
I don't think we've discussed, just because there's like so recent, especially the one with the Unknown Commander. But when it comes to the different Phantom suits, I think we've discussed it, me and Andreas, and decided that we're probably not gonna adapt after that. We already have some signifiers for our old Phantom, like the older Phantom stories, where the Phantom either has a big hat or a cape or those like classic pirate boots, and also what kind of weapon he has. So we find it already fairly easy to distinguish him from his older counterparts. But with that said, I really enjoyed the different artworks that Wheel came up for the different generation of Phantoms. I think they're really creative and fun. It's going to be funny to see how that looks in the coming Sunday stories. I don't know, has there been any daily stories where they have shown those new old suits? So I'm interested if they're going to have it in the dailies as well, or if that is something like Sunday story exclusive. And when it comes to the Unknown Commander, maybe we'll adapt into that. I'm not sure. I think it's like how they've done it now works. I mean, it's still the Unknown Commander. There hasn't been any major changes there. It all depends on like what the new game rules are and how we're going to introduce those to the authors, I think, because I don't think like all the authors are not adamant on reading every single story, so they might not know about these changes, so we have to be able to present them as well. If you look at like our production, a couple of years ago we made the story Kit and Katya by Philip and Janusz Orden, and that one is very influenced by the daily story because it features Kit being up in the secret Himalayan city. So our universes definitely cross and are supposed to be the same. And sometimes we are in direct contact with Tony DePaul, just so to make sure that our ideas aren't conflicting with his ideas, or that we don't do anything crazy. Like, we're very adamant of like not killing off any major characters or introducing major villains or doing anything that actually disrupts the main lore. But with that said, also, I think we are allowed to differentiate us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we're not forced to follow a change immediately. And like you say, the Kitten Katja Himalayan story, it's taken many years after the Himalayan concept was introduced until we started to dip our toes into it. So it's not something that I feel that we have to hurry and adapt. And then in a few years' time, then who knows if this change was lasting or if it was just temporary. We don't have to do some things immediately. Phantom readers are used to reading stories from almost a time span of 90 years soon. So we can have an issue with the stories from the 1950s, 70s, and a story that is produced this year, and there will be some differences. So it's not something that we have to hurry up, and we're not sending out the mass email to all our artists that now you have to draw the past phantoms according to this template by Jeff Weigel. It's not that immediate when we do a change.
Well, we haven't put that in the Phantom Bible yet, so I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. One more question, and I know that I've taken up a lot of your time, so I do appreciate, and I'm sure the listeners do as well. Briefly, what are your thoughts on AI? Does it have a place? Are you worried about it? And this is your chance to get on a high horse or whatever. Bit of fun.
Do you want to start, Andreas?
Yeah, I'm worried that people don't care if it's AI or not. We have seen some examples of AI art used in Swedish children's books, and there has been a debate about that. And the problem, as I see it, is that now that the AI is bad and you can see that it's problematic, it's got 6 fingers and one leg is longer than the other, people still don't, the majority still don't care. And in a few years' time or even shorter, we will have perfect AI, which is indistinguishable from human art. So that's the problem, is to convince the people that have no, they're like consumers, but they're not fans like we are. They don't care if Cy Berry drew it or if AI drew it, as long as it looks like they want the Phantom to look. And that is problematic in my eyes, because I think that AI has possibilities, but I think it's quickly replacing human art and creativity instead of replacing boring tasks that no one really wants to do, even if they pay you for it. Like, those are the jobs, or rather the stuff that you are forced to do, that should be replaced by AI, and instead free more time for people to engage in art and stuff like that. And like someone said, AI is a tool for people that don't have the talent or don't want to take the time to become talented. It's an easy fix. I can enjoy trying out stuff with AI, but it's not something that I would ever consider presenting to the public. That would be something that is fun for myself, like doodling on a piece of paper for my own eyes or something like that, but not to use for anything that is really creative or creating stories. I would like to have like a no AI symbol on not just the Phantom, but like on everything that is AI free. And I think that we almost have to have some sort of marking like that in the future. It's going to be something like people like us will look for. Is this AI or not? Well, here's the no AI symbol. So now I should be able to rely on the fact that this is produced by people, and the money that I spend goes to people.
Yeah.
So kind of like a comic vegan thing. Yeah, we're having a no GMO or vegan friendly.
Yeah, and not just comics. Like I said, it's books and movies, and there's going to be AI in everything creative. Like, where do you draw the line? As of now, I don't want to read books where the storyline has been written by AI, or read a comic where AI. I mean, there has been also cases where AI has been discovered in cover art in America, where they had to pull comic covers from DC Comics, even like the there are people who are trying to make. Yeah, it was a Superman cover, and there are people that are going to try to even fool the publishers, so to speak. So you have people that want to use AI, and the general public don't really care about these things, because they are more like casual consumers of comics and literature or whatnot. But it's us fans that, we differentiate between different writers and artists. We like some better and some not so much, and we, it's for us it starts to feel bad quickly.
Yeah, I can only agree with everything Andreas has said. More or less touched on everything that I was about to say. I can also personally, as somebody who's not only like a project leader for the Phantom, but also like I draw comics myself. Not as much as I did before, but that's how I initially got started with the whole thing. And I find it's like extremely distasteful how easy people are like taking the hard work of artists and like just throwing it in the trash because a computer can give a slight resemblance of what the consumer wants. And the fact that people have such an easy way of like looking past the fingers and the additional eyes and additional like weird anatomy, that people have such an easy way of just like excusing that and not caring about that. Yeah. I find that very disheartening and like disrespectful for all the hardworking artists that are out there. And the fact that like there's so much pressure from people who gets AI sold to them as like a wonder. It's like almost like snake oil, like people say it can work and like replace any kind of work without actually knowing how to implement that. I think that's also something that really frustrates me, that like I've been to countless meetings with different people who've been saying like, well, if we just give AI every Phantom story, it will be able to push out a good Phantom story. And it's like, what do you even mean when you say give the AI all of the stories? How do you even do that? People just, because there's some marketing person who has said that you can feed AI stuff, but nobody really knows how do you do it? How do you make this into a safe environment where it's not like stealing copyrighted material from other places, which is also the biggest issue, that this is just like property theft, like the biggest property theft going on in front of everybody's noses, and everybody's just accepting it for the greater good of the potential of AI having, even though I think the potential AI has is not like inherently apparent. Now I'm hearing myself going on a rant because I'm really against it. But yeah, it's like it's very. I think I'm hoping that it'll be a long time before we actually see it saturating the comic book markets. I think, as Andreas said, I think it's very weird that like, why have we chosen to use AI and like showcase AI on the artistic level? Why aren't there any AI that just makes accounting or does that? And I think that in the end is because that's not as sensationalistic. Like, you can't show an AI do a perfect Excel sheet to investors and they won't think that's amazing. But if you make an AI poop out 5 pictures of Disney princesses and say it's like, oh, it made this under 5 seconds, then that's impressive, because it is impressive, and it's scary that it can generate pictures. But it's like, but how do you actually implement this when you could use AI to like help or absolve the actual boring work, or the like work where it's actually needed? Why push down artists who already have like pretty shitty deals to begin with, don't get the recognition that they deserve? That's my opinion.
Some great points. we've added on a good half hour to the podcast with those last couple of questions.
Yeah,
So,
with his grievances.
No, look, it's great. Well, I hope your listeners have enjoyed that. We would love to hear your thoughts, feedback, and opinions on our social media platforms or over at the YouTube channel. Remember, if you comment, you automatically go into our draw for our monthly competition for free Chronicle Chamber swag. If you have any ideas for episode 300, which is fast approaching, please contact us at chroniclechamber@gmail.com, or our website is chroniclechamber.com. You can subscribe to us via YouTube or through your favorite podcast apps, including iTunes or Spotify. Thank you. Please get in contact with us. And as always, happy Fantoming. You just have to say it as well.
Happy Fantoming.
It's our catch cry. You're gonna sign off every podcast with happy Fantoming.
500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die." The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom, enemies beware. The Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He fights